this content is for kids.
It's not for kids.
Isn't that what I said?
No, it's not for kids. If you are 13 years or younger, this is not for you. Do I have to kill somebody in order to actually make that point across?
No, man, you don't have to kill
Wait
no
a
one.
second.
Oh, no.
When we return to our planet, the High Court may well sentence you to torture.
He likes movies, we like movies. SeptumSin versus the world. SeptumSin versus the world. SeptumSin versus the world. SeptumSin versus the world. I'd buy that for $1.
So greetings all, and we're having a impromptu anime discussion. I like to try and discuss an anime series or have it discussed somewhere when we're doing a related anime movie. Just like my hope is on our actual monthly anime group, we're going to be covering Puella Magi Magica when we cover the movies in June. So that's going to be fun as well.
Mm-hmm.
But this week on Inside Movies Galore, we're covering the live-action movie of Detroit Metal City, or DMC. So here we decided, hey, this Tuesday, which is when this is going up, we're going to cover the anime that I want to say it preceded. Of course, the manga preceded that. And we have with us, of course, my co-host, Jake.
Hey.
And we have Mo from, darn it.
Retro Cult Home Video. Thanks for
I got it mostly right the first time we did this, and I don't know why. Just blanking. But so we've got some fun stuff. I'm glad that Mo could join us for this one. Especially since out of the three of us, Mo is the only one of us that has a metal background as far as musically.
Indeed.
I skew more towards punk, and I believe Jake skews more towards country.
Skewed.
Though I'm not saying that it's an entirely, it's just skews towards. It's just like I don't think any one of us listens to anything exclusively. But,
I listen to just about everything under the sun, and to be honest, I enjoyed a lot of the music in this. But as we go on, I'll talk a little more on the particular issues. But
yeah, I mean, I find it strangely ironic, I guess, or whatever you want to call it, too, that this just happened to come about during, as you guys know, I've been discovering ska for the first time and really, diving into it hard. So I've been listening to like what could arguably be, considered the most wholesome and fun of, heavy music subgenres or whatever. There's definitely some punk in there, and there's some snotty, gross humor sometimes, but nowhere on the level of this stuff. So, and they definitely don't have a horn section. That's
this one's slightly not for kids.
Despite the oh man, I should have found a picture of the little Krauser-chan.
This is great. So essentially, Detroit Metal City is about this guy named Negishi who ends up going to Tokyo so that he can become a pop star with his favorite, like a Swedish folk or something like that. I can't remember what, Swedish pop or something.
Yeah.
The problem is he sucks at it. And I'm not going to say that the music that he creates really sucks, but they present that he sucks at it.
He sucks at performing it, that's for sure.
But what we do find that he has a strange talent for is death metal. And he ends up in this band and leading this band called Detroit Metal City. And he ends up transforming into this Krauser-san the second.
Johannes Krauser the second.
Which you get to be introduced to Krauser the first in the manga. which I believe the manga is based on. It has a lot of. It's more of like almost an omake style. It's a very short features. And the anime has done a lot like that too. Is it's just little short stories that they tag together. Each episode's I think only 15 minutes, and those are divided into about 2 story bits too. So they're not long. It's not a long series. It's not a hard one to get through, but it is definitely one that people could say is a fun series. Some can, anyway.
They could say that.
They could say that. So let's go ahead and get started. So why don't we go with Jake first this time? So was this your first time with DMC?
You know, it wasn't. You subjected me to this years ago. Okay. DMC is a weird one for me. A weird one. For one, as was pointed out, I don't have a strong metal background. I've listened to a fair bit of metal type music, and again, musically, I actually like a lot of what I've heard. I really like this band musically. It's when we get into the lyrics and manner of delivery of said lyrics that I have always had an issue. So this was kind of an odd one for me there. The lyrics are deeply disturbing if you take them seriously. They definitely would make even people who were known for kind of shock lyrics. Let's take as an example, maybe getting away from metal a little bit, but a good example maybe would be Eminem, where he would do a lot of stuff just to shock people early in his career. I think a lot of this goes beyond that in terms of the level of what they're going for. And the other things that bug me, their president, their producer, manager, what have you, who they call president, is one of the most disgustingly vulgar, obscene characters in all of anime.
I don't know about that.
Well, she's up there. Let's put that way. She's up there. And so is their drummer. And I feel really, really horrible for the girl that likes Negishi, that he likes, because she clearly likes him, and he keeps doing these horrible things to her, and she keeps forgiving him. And so I had some issues there. So needless to say, the first time I saw the anime, I pretty much hated it. And then I saw the live action movie, and it's almost the exact same story. And I loved it. I thought it was hilarious. And I'm like, how in the bleeding hell did I like one so much and not the other one? So when Brandon said that he was going to do the DMC movie for Movies Galore, I was like, okay, cool. It'd be time to revisit that. But I also had bought the anime in the meantime, and I'm like, okay, here's an excuse to rewatch it. And on second viewing, I still find it very problematic. But I was able to get the humor a lot better than before. I find it very odd, interesting, hard to describe. Well, it's not hard to describe, but it's hard to say exactly where I fall in this show. But I'm kind of glad I saw it again. It definitely gave me an opportunity to reevaluate it. And if you have a tolerance for shock lyrics and, certain things. The good thing is the episodes are really short. You can literally,
Yeah.
I watched the whole show in 2 sittings. It took about 3 hours maybe to watch the whole show. So, yeah. So it's got that going for it.
True enough. You're only subjected to it for so long.
Right.
I'm going to have to ask that you start your first impressions, Brandon, because I got a situation I have to deal with. It'll only take me a moment. I can still hear you guys. It's just,
right.
I got to do this first.
So, for me, I was first introduced to this at a time when I was watching anime by not necessarily legal means. I was watching it as it was coming out. Usually I was watching it before it was licensed. So in theory, in the United States, watching it like that before it's licensed is fair game. And of course, had to get a copy once it did get licensed here. It just, to me, was totally off the wall. I'm usually I pretty much enjoy stuff musically. And this just... I don't know why. It's and maybe it's because of the timing, because this was released back in 2008, and I saw this not long after it came out. So shock stuff was kind of going away at that point. That type of humor was not as in style as it was, I should say, back then. But it was going away. But this kind of brought it back to me. I loved listening to the lyrics of the songs and the characters and just the dichotomy. And it always fascinated me. Negishi is a fascinating character to me, and we'll talk about that.
Definitely.
We'll talk about characters. I like characters that are somewhat complex mentally, and he definitely has a number of complexes. So it is for sure something to dive into as we move forward. But those are my reasons for just enjoying it in general. And I'll probably say something similar when we talk about it on Inside Movies Galore, which will be on the same day that this premieres. So let's see. Yeah, well, that'll be fun. So how about you, Mo? If you're back.
Well, you guys are onto something here, though, with your impressions of it. Definitely death metal is supposed to shock people, So in defense of the show, it fairly accurately portrays a caricature of sort of the stigma or the stereotype that people probably associate with death metal based on the lyrics. Honestly, they don't go disgusting enough with a lot of the lyrics, but it's, on the flip side, a lot more of the dudes that front these death metal bands would be closer to our main character in real life. There might be some ABBA in their bag when they do that Amoeba series where they, what's in my bag or whatever, or some J-pop or something like that, Cannibal Corpse is a great example. George Corpse Grinder fucking Fisher from Cannibal Corpse is probably the most disgusting lyrics in the fucking world, or close to them. But dude's main hobby is like winning stuffed animals out of claw machines and donating them to charity. I think Blondie is like one of his favorite bands.
Claw.
This is very much meant to be a sort of spoof on the extreme caricature of bands like these. So anything offensive in it, or all the references to rape or violence or debauchery like that, or a lot of the things that are portrayed before our very eyes for the sake of absurd humor, are definitely not meant to be taken seriously at all. And if you have some of, like, I guess, experience with the sort of stereotype of that kind of music, it makes you understand a lot of the gross misogynist stuff that's portrayed in there. It's like, that's what people think these bands are doing. So, and functioning as sort of like a Japanese equivalent to Metalocalypse, I think that this show is fucking awesome. It would have fit in on Adult Swim if it wasn't.
Oh, yes.
several times more extreme than anything that they would ever allow on there.
I was actually
But
thinking about it with the animation style that it really felt like a Adult Swim series.
And you can
Yeah.
almost see why there's no English dub to this. When
I
it
would
comes to
ruin
dub
it.
cut. And that's why I say I'm hoping that Ron does actually watch the movie. I know he's usually against watching it if it requires a sub, but it's
do
just reading the subs. It's just one of those that I'm usually for dubbing, but not in this case.
It
Though
would ruin it.
I would be curious as to how some of those songs would sound in English. They would have to work hard at it, though, because adapting the sounds and phonetics would be
The lyrics, I mean, maybe in that death metal style, it could work. I don't know. I've never tried it, but I mean, I imagine you could just get away with just having the same audio for the songs because most people can't understand what they're fucking hearing in death metal anyways, unless they have like subtitles or lyrics to look at. So if they did an English dub, they'd probably just keep the same music, assuming, most people wouldn't pick up on it,
So was
go
this
ahead.
your first time being introduced to DMC?
I'd read some of the manga before because obviously the concept of something like this is going to jump right out at me when I'm looking through like different manga to try. And I think it was probably, I don't know, like a year, 2 years ago that I messed with a little bit of the manga. It definitely, I think, translates better as an anime because you get the actual audio element of it. Whereas with, reading a comic, you're just kind of left to imagine. I thought that they were like a black metal band and were just improperly using the term death metal, which always struck me as weird because the extreme metal scene in Japan is insane. They have tons of black metal and death metal. They very much know the difference between all of it. And a lot of grindcore too. But point being, you kind of need to hear what the band sounds like, I think, to get the full impact of it. And I love it. I mean, if it wasn't so goddamn expensive, I would buy a copy of it.
Is it out of print now?
I feel like it is. I was looking, and it was
could be
almost $100.
Holy crap!
Yeah.
Yeah, this was one I held off for a while because the price was more than I wanted to pay, and I think it probably ended up. I think I ended up getting it for around 10, 11-ish, maybe.
Which is fair for the length of it. And
yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
that's a good price.
That's
I'd
what
pay
I got
30
mine
for it. I'm not going to pay 90 for it or whatever.
Right. And I think the reason, I don't think I have the movie, and I'm pretty sure the reason being that it's hard to find. I'm almost sure that's, one reason being, but yeah. But
I loved it though. I mean, we haven't even got to mine yet. I think you just asked me an adjacent question. So, are you trying to ask me my first impressions now? Is that what we're
Yes.
oh yeah, go for it.
All right. I loved it, man. I thought it was fucking awesome. I mean, all that stuff that I set aside, with as far as taking it seriously, I think if you can just get into it for the absurdity and the shock value. And again, the episodes are so short, like Jake mentioned, that it doesn't really affect you either way. I mean, if there's something you really can't deal with, it's gone in 13 minutes when you chop out the intro and outro. So I love it, man. I think it's a blast. I think it really was what I needed to, because I've been in like happy ska land for a while. Time to like get disgusting again and for a minute and be like, yeah, this is, I'm still that dude.
So we'll get into it a bit. I'm going to try this a little differently for sake of time instead of breaking down episode by episode. We'll come to certain episodes that we like or that laid an impression a little bit later, just because they really are. It is probably one of the more episodic series.
Yeah.
Oh, very much so.
And little chunks, and you could mix and match most of the episodes at any order, and you'd probably be fine.
Yeah, there's really, I mean, there is a continuity and plot of sorts. But it's just basically, they're this band that's super fucking hated and loved by the people around, around.
Yeah.
You know, they're one of the hottest indie band on the scene simply because they're so fucking shocking and insane that it's going to draw attention. And then the show pretty much plays out with a series of rivalries and personal problems. This dude finds himself trying to reconcile his life as like kind of this soft-spoken dweeby guy that likes, you know, indie folk rock, and his position sort of being forced to perform as the singer of this death metal band. And there's, you know, lots of little times where you see that maybe it's not altogether not a part of his actual personality.
He definitely has. You know, it's always the quiet ones. You know, he definitely has a little Krauser inside of him. That, but one thing I want to mention real quick that Mo, you mentioned, and I agree with, is actually I didn't really talk about the positives in my impressions. Maybe I should have. One being, I agree with Brandon. I like the dichotomy of the main character. I like the idea that, you know, he is this soft-spoken, quiet, kind-hearted guy who has an inner rage monster that he has more and more difficulty controlling as the show goes on, and I find that kind of amusing. But also, one thing that Mo was talking about, how you know they're all, you know, the shock value and all that kind of stuff being part of the deal. I think one thing that is both problematic and amusing for me in this show is the way that their legend keeps growing in leaps and bounds, mostly because of Negashi's inept reactions to things. And I find it hilarious that the way that he keeps adding to the legend without even trying. But one thing that kind of disturbs me is the way the audience buys into that legend and just is so into it. And they are taking it way too seriously, I think. Well, but you know,
the thing is, that is a reflection on real life. I mean, shoot, look at politics.
Oh, yeah.
Politics is a great example how a figure in politics who will remain unnamed can actually take on a godlike status amongst a lot of the people who are there.
Lord help us if Krauser's son ran for office.
The difference here, though, is that in heavy music, by and large, everybody kind of at the back of your mind, you know, it's bullshit. Right.
Okay.
Like
there's kind of like wrestling.
Exactly, Jacob. It is like sort of a kayfabe thing, like wrestling. Like, yeah, sure, you know. Even when I listen to like, you know, old Burzum or Mayhem and stuff, I'm like, these guys were burning down churches and shit. Like, you know, I'm just playing into the fantasy of it. In reality, one dude burnt down several churches. The other guys were all wimps about it. And then he killed a dude and went to prison. I mean, that's so a dude that was crazy like that. You know, it wasn't all these bands, but like it builds on the mythos of it, I guess, or whatever. And that's a rarity in extreme music in and of itself. Most of these guys are fucking nerds. You know, it's dudes like me that just learned how to play guitar really well because they liked fucking, you know, Slayer or something, and then they just made a heavier band, you know, and the shock stuff is there, but
let's talk
it definitely like it can build up a cult like sort of mythos around these dudes that you're just happy enough to keep going even though you know it's mostly bullshit. The random metal nerd out there who's like committed murder and tried to blame it on the music is about as common as the people that do it for video games, right? There's by far way more people that do extreme stupid shit like that because of politics, if you know what I'm saying.
Oh, I mean, yeah, people listen to music that's crazy all the time and just work like anybody else, you know?
Yeah. Most of us know it's bullshit. I mean, there's very rare humans in the world that have ever lived up to it, like dudes like Gigi Allen. I mean, I can't think of a more punk rock, disgusting human being to have ever walked the face of the earth. But it's good to know there was only one of them, you know.
So let's talk about characters. So we'll start with the main character, Soichi Negashi. And the dichotomy is so extreme that he is actually voiced by 2 voice actors,
Yeah.
with Daisuke Kishio for Negishi himself, and then for his Krauser persona, Yuji Ueda does Krauser, which it's great because you've got kind of these 2 warring halves of his personality, and you can tell Negishi Krauser's always been there, that he's always had that darker, angry part of himself that's angry at life, angry that his music isn't as popular as he wants it to be. And it comes out with Krauser, but he doesn't want to accept it. And that's what makes it so interesting and extreme, because then he pushes his other side to the extreme in his private life, so that he's trying to be as far apart from Krauser. But when those times where he actually slips into Krauser in real life, it just really screws things.
Yeah. And one interesting thing, there's a couple reasons that lead to that. Well, there's so few, but one being it's a delicate balancing act, and sometimes he just, he throws the wrong ball up in the air at the wrong time or whatever. But one thing that I find really interesting, which I get as someone who has a creative bent, and I think most of the artists out there probably would get with the character, is that even though he is repulsed by the whole idea of DMC, and he is repulsed by their music and what he has written, he himself wrote the music. And even though he is disgusted by it, he's weirdly possessive of it. And there are times where Krauser comes out because he can't stand to see other people take his stuff and run with it, which I find kind of fun.
I mean, this is something that I wanted to ask y'all. When it comes to Negishi, he seems to me like this kind of guy that's just basically taken it and has never really had a true outlet for his anger. And that's why I feel like Krauser came from. I don't feel like a lot of the stuff is as much slips into the character as it is slips into a part of himself. But maybe I'm the only one. I mean,
no, I feel that. Yeah. I mean, that's what I was getting at with the, the character is a little bit more a part of his actual personality than he'd like to think a lot of the time, And I mean, I guess, I don't know, maybe some of those, I think it's more, again, like the opposite in real life. This is like a caricature of the shit. I think a lot of those death metal dudes do kind of lean into other shit in their lives outside of their bands, because most of them don't listen to death metal. It's not a thing that they're doing. There are a lot of them that do too, but I mean, it's like most of them I can think of when they say favorite bands, it's like almost never just a bunch of death metal bands, unless you specifically ask them what their favorite death metal bands are.
Right.
It is just an outlet for the angry part of them, or the part of them that wants to like shock and horrify people, and that's into scary movies and stuff. And then they go home and they're normal people. I think some of them probably have had very real situations where they've had to reconcile the fact that, like, I'm a dad, but normally I'm part of like this band, but I don't think it's to the extreme that this kid is going through. But it is an interesting story element, right?
I mean, and you got a few people who are like, Jack Dark at the sort of towards the end, who is living the metal lifestyle full time. But of course, even he has a kind of realistic and nice side to him. I mean, he takes those shiitake mushrooms at the end.
Well, that was kind of an interesting thing, because he ends up, once again, Negishi ends up almost by accident proving himself in front of Jack in a way that, like, and then when he sees him without the makeup and he realizes that was the kid he met before, it's like, really? He just couldn't. That was kind of a fun thing there. I think that Negishi is he has again taken to the extreme. The bassist for the band, Yagi /Wada, like his real name's Masayuki Wada, but he plays Alexander Yagi. He seems to me probably closer to what Mo's talking about, because he's definitely all about the being in the band and doing
He's
the
got the money.
part, playing the part and whatever. But he has a better sense of who he is and, you know, separation of character and whatever. And he's not nearly as extreme in either role as the other one is. So it's kind of, I guess, part of that. What's that?
He doesn't get a lot of chance to shine, so to speak,
Right.
but he has his moments, like where he's,
Oh yeah,
where he gets out of, he's like, I gotta ratchet things up, and end up burning down the venue that they, where they go on the double date, and he's probably doing the best. He's doing the best. They shouldn't have invited the drummer, but
well, yes.
he's doing the best as he can to do it. But he's got this flamboyant dress in, because that's just how he is. He's probably this dude who's a ladies' man type guy in his real life.
Right. Yeah.
Well, let me just say too, there is a lot of like rock star type shit and stuff, because really they're a death metal band for the sake of the story, but there's glam metal elements in there. They kind of have like a bit of a Kiss thing going on with the cult following and
well, I mean, heck, that's where the title comes from.
Exactly. I mean, and then, you know, it's an amalgamation of heavy metal and like rock star tropes all thrown into one. The death metal dudes are not fucking getting, I mean, there are bands that get shit faced, to be sure, but it's, most of them are boring on the road because it's very technical music to actually play, you know. The bands that are getting fucked up are like the less technical bands. You probably have a better chance of blacking out on tour with fucking, I don't know, Duran Duran than you would with, you know, Vader or somebody like that.
And yet you could, actually, Wada kind of strikes me as, like, in terms of his offstage persona, he strikes me as someone you would expect to see in Duran Duran or something like that. But but I think you might be right about the technical stuff. Like, I could be wrong. You might know more than I do, but I know that just that, you know, that they do. Well, there, I could barely do it. That'll screw up your
to do.
No, that would screw up your throat. No problem. And I would imagine that anyone who did drink heavily and do all the hardcore drugs and anything would probably be unable to keep that up, because the demands just the singing itself has on your throat.
No, you're 1,000% correct, dude. The dudes that do that are the guys that do 2 great albums and then blow out their fucking voice, and they have to get some other singer the fans never accept, and then it's just weird from there and awkward. But it's, you know, it sounds like the type of thing that would ruin your voice, and it can. But if you learn how to do it correctly, it is the type of thing that you really don't want to do too often drunk, because you have a tendency to go overboard with it and blow out your voice for the night. I've done it myself. It's, you know.
So what was your thoughts, Mo, about Jagi, since we were talking about it?
Who now?
He's the bass player.
Oh, he's fucking rad, man. I mean, I love the whole fire breathing thing. I love how he burnt down the club Great White style. And he just didn't even mean to, and then it just turns into a serious situation. That was one of the best episodes in the show. Was the punk versus metal thing too, because that's always sort of been a weird underlying thing. I mean, there's the crossover bands and everything, but by and large, punk fans and metal fans don't tend to publicly overlap as often as they should.
Actually, it's funny how you have the three musics that tend to be have rivalries with each other, because you got punk, rap, and metal represented. And I don't know how rap and metal get along, but I know that rap and punk, though they tend to not get along.
Well, they all got along real well for a period, and it was called the late '90s, and there was some good stuff that came out of it. Some embarrassing shit, Limp Bizkit. It's it happens,
Well,
but I like actually truly do like Limp Bizkit, if I'm being honest, but because it's
well, actually, one that kind of borrowed heavily from rap and metal was Linkin Park. They were a pretty fun little group there.
great, man.
Yeah.
It's one of those things, man. There's always going to be sort of that underlying thing, I think, with punk, metal, and hip hop, no matter what incarnation we're seeing of it, because they're all three, like, if you think about it, the first types of extreme music.
Yeah.
Even rock and roll. Black Sabbath is badass fucking like proto metal rock and roll shit, but it's not what I would consider extreme music that needed to have that label attached to it. You know what I mean? It's just really hard rock and roll. Parents in the 70s were probably like, oh, boo-hoo about that, because my kid's into the occult and he's listening to this band that's like a really hard blues band. What am I going to do? But play them Cannibal Corpse or Slayer even, it's like a totally different world, So punk is kind of the original, punk rock really is the original extreme music, and then from that birthed metal. And then metal became its own established enough thing that it could then start infighting with the punk dudes to see who was like the first brand of extreme music. And then rap came along and they were like, we can do this shit without all the guitars and equipment. And these guys were pissed because it's like, well, they're out there getting kids pissed off and angry too and like having fun. So I don't know, man. I mean, a lot of it's media driven though too.
Oh yeah.
I think so.
And then, well, and the rap rivalry in here, of course, is an interesting one because you turn out that, the kid was a childhood friend of Negashi's who had also created this entire bullshit persona for himself that became his big public persona. And that was kind of a fun little episode too. But yeah, but the punk episode was just more like they were just kind of, oh man, why are these people so popular? And they were just calling them out in the music and whatever. But
yeah, I mean it's a fun element to it because it exists. There's definitely metal bands that are bummed where it's like, oh, we play there, and so some fucking we get like 150 people, and some punk rock band plays there, and like fucking 500 kids show up. I'm sure that's existed. It's definitely a thing.
So let's our third member of the band, Camus. He's a very interesting fellow. He's not a very sociable guy. Matter of fact, in that fire episode, they find him as the only one who didn't leave. He just kept drumming the whole time.
Yeah, I love it so fucking much.
He's probably the most metal of the three of them, but even he is kind of this just kind of reserved, nerdy guy who says very inappropriate things.
Yeah, I'm not so sure I'd say reserved. I would just say that he has a one-track mind, and it's pretty well derailed.
Dude, it's, kind of a thing with drummers, though. It really is. Almost most of them that I've met, like, that were technical, like, death metal drummers, those are dudes that show up and are, like, inside practicing on a drum pad by themselves in a fucking corner, while the other dudes are, like, maybe taking shots and getting lubricated for the show, Drummers don't get enough credit. I mean, they do, but they don't. It's like people like the technical prowess of it, but they're not usually the rock star members of the band unless they take some vocal, like, shitmouth frontal approach to it, like Lars Ulrich from Metallica. Most of the time they're just back there doing their thing, and then they've got a bunch of shit they have to take away after the show. They're not like the other members of the band where it's like, I don't even think vocalists usually use microphones they bring. It's like a house mic. And then, the guitarists have like a guitar tech that can load their shit up and take it away. no problem. They have like 6 different guitars they can use too, so if something gets damaged in transit, it's not a big deal. But the drummers, the dudes you usually see that have to hang out for 45 minutes afterwards to make sure their drum set doesn't get fucked up when they pack it away. It's just logistics. It's not as easy to get a new drum kit on tour as it is like a guitar from Guitar Center.
He's definitely one of the more interesting fellows. He doesn't say a lot, but what he says tends to be usually very offensive, and it's usually food or sex related. One of those.
Pretty much always food or sex related.
Yes.
It takes a lot of energy to run the fucking machine that drives the band back there, So they either need proteins to burn or they need to burn some proteins. You know what I'm saying?
But
and actually, one thing I do want to mention, Mo talking just now about the technical aspects of drumming, but we should mention again, I like the actual music of this group, but all 3 of them technically are very skilled musicians, and one of the reasons Negishi is able so much to keep building on the legends and whatever is he actually is a damn good guitarist. He just for whatever reason, I guess he needs that Krauser persona to really do it. It's like if he's just playing the pop, he comes off as someone who's kind of just playing around,
He comes across as corny as heck, and like he's not taking it serious because he's got this weird look on his face when he's doing it.
Yeah.
Because he's like it looks like he's getting off on it when he's doing it.
Almost. Yeah.
Well, I think some of it too is like, and that's definitely speaks to more theatrical bands too. I think there's definitely ones that have put on the makeup because it's like, oh, this might give us like a gimmick that'll make up for us being a shitty band overall. But I think a lot of them started, or the dudes that came about it naturally anyways, because it's easier to be like that character. It's easier to let loose when you're like underneath some persona, with makeup or a mask or some bullshit like that, so I can understand that aspect of it being, something that would be frustrating trying to play music outside of that because he doesn't have the same sort of confidence that he does when he's Krauser,
Well, I fully get it, and actually, a show that I keep thinking of in my mind that has a lot of parallels with this, of course, is Zagretzko, where you have the quiet little office worker who does death metal karaoke. But like, I do not pretend to be a very good musician. I've never had the dedication or talent to learn an instrument, and I've never been a great singer. But I enjoy singing. But the thing is, like, I pretty much have to be on stage, or particularly karaoke, I have no problem with whatsoever. And I can let loose, but outside of that narrow thing,
you're not going to pull out an acoustic guitar and serenade us around the fire or anything.
If I'm like if I'm just like hanging out with people or whatever, and someone wants me to sing, I'm like,
and that's fine. That's why open mics exist. You don't necessarily want to take the stage like this motherfucker did, though. At some trendy like place where some famous guy known for being like some aficionado of shit is running stuff, and then you get all embarrassed.
Yeah, and I probably would have had a very distinct possibility of them coming up and going, hey, I mean, that was kind of a dick move, though.
It really was.
Where he came up, he's like, if you're just going to play around, why don't you go outside? And it's like,
it wasn't bad.
No, it wasn't bad. It was
one
just
of my favorite bits of music in the whole shit, actually. I mean, it just sounded like a chill little coffee shop performance,
And really, honestly, I have paid money to see a performance like that. Yeah. I went to a show once. Not specifically, but I went to a show once. I'm trying to remember exactly who the headlining act was, but I believe the artist's name was Dave Wilcox, if I'm remembering correctly. And afterwards, I was like, that concert was like story time around the campfire. I mean, it was like,
Yes.
it was actually, I want to say it was for Jars of Clay, and that might have been why I had such a strong opinion on it, because Jars of Clay does put on a hell of a concert. They really do perform. But this guy, he was sitting, I think he had a chair. I think he was sitting, strumming, and singing. And this is at the Salem Civic Center. This is not some coffee shop. This is a venue. And so this kid, Negishi, wasn't doing anything less than that.
No.
And, and it's kind of, yeah.
You could probably make a solid living traveling Japan, doing that in coffee shops and entertaining people. I mean, you hit the nail on the head where you said, because it is kind of that thing. Like I was going to mention that, which is, you might not be able to do that around a campfire, but if you could get the courage up to do it on stage, you might be able to make that stage feel like your little campfire session for a minute. I mean, there's people that excel at that. If you guys are familiar with Lady Lamb, the beekeeper, she's a goddamn legend with that kind of shit.
I'm not particularly though, but I was about to say though, like you, when you were just saying that you can make it your own or whatever, and I was sitting there going, whether the audience wants you to or not, because the one I think of when I think of coffee shops and performances that are less than professional. I think of Phoebe on Friends.
Oh well, yeah.
Well, and Negishi does try to get his stuff out by performing on the street, and that's one of the weird running things is that his regular music just doesn't grab people. Like DMC's music, for some reason, even people who aren't all that into it, once they hear it, they're like they become obsessed with it.
Oh yeah.
And now you get to hear like his favorite, that Raspberry Tart song at the end of the episode. They always start the episode with Setsugai, and then they end it with the other one. And you get to hear how it sounds professionally done, and it's not a bad song.
No, it's not.
So, but you can see the talent that all three of them have, and Negishi is probably the most talented of the three. It's just sadly he's being recognized for the part of his talent that he'd rather not be recognized for.
Yeah. Well, like one moment I did enjoy, and this is where I was talking about how possessive he is of his music, is like when he's on the street corner singing his stuff and no one's listening. And then this DMC cover band starts up like right there. And he's sitting there going, well, they're ignoring me, and then listening to this other group this is my music. And then after a few minutes, he goes and dons the full makeup and goes back. And it's like...
I think that's how a lot of reunions happen for some of these fucking rock bands that should have retired 40 years ago,
Right.
Kiss arguably being a huge influence on the look of this band, being one of the worst offenders of it. I think every 10 years they hear a Kiss cover band doing it better than they did back in the day.
Like, made it relevant. We need to get back into it.
That could be.
What we're missing the most important member of the band that Mo has managed to display, which is the biggest capitalism.
Tokyo Grandpa. Oh no, that's a different character. Excuse me.
Who is basically there to take the physical abuse of Krauser and others on stage, and
he's their sacrificial swine.
And he's a masochist, so he gets off on it. And they give him one episode to where you get to learn a little bit more about him.
Hands down, best character in the show. I absolutely fucking love this dude.
Like when they got imposter when the episode where they take the guy like this, the kind of Caribbean guy that they threw on. It's like,
that did not. That was awkward.
And then the pig is like offering his. He's like, okay, it's like he offered his rump to cross.
Yeah, that part was funny. That part was funny. It was. I felt like that Caribbean dude. They got a little overboard with the stereotypes there.
Oh, yeah.
That was awkward. But yeah, but that was an interesting thing where again the audience didn't really know. You had this clear faker, and they didn't really know how to respond to him. And then in Agushi had quit. He had 1 foot out the door, but he just had to. He had to see how it was going to go, and after a few minutes, he's like, "Enough of this shit." He puts the makeup on and goes back. It's like,
no one was possessive of his music. Things you were talking about.
But yeah, I did find it kind of amusing and sad that the capitalist pig actually was like. It was like it was a pet. He was like a cat or a dog. He was sniffing which one, this one. And
I just loved how he was like that extra member of the band too. You know, in a very heartwarming way. He's like one of their hype men or something. You know. And it's not a thing that exists in bands often enough anymore, and definitely not something that's existed as often as it should in extreme metal music. I've always thought that there should be more like, you know, gore slaves or people like that in music, but then that would make them less special, I suppose. But I mean, you know, the gore slaves or people like that, the different characters in Guar are on the same level as like somebody like Flava Flav, who basically his job is to wear a giant clock around his neck and yell, "Yeah, boy!" in the background is like, shit, you know. But I mean, it's like he's just on there. Or even in ska, it existed with. I forget the dude's name, but Mighty Mighty Bosstones had a guy that was like a paid member of the band that just came on stage and like danced around and hyped people up. That was his whole job.
I mean, Pam had a guy on theirs named Balzac, who was just a
fuck yeah.
He was just this dude who got to be very much a fan. So he got up on stage and he did this thing where he lit his crotch on fire, and that started to become a regular thing at their shows.
So they eventually just like took him on tour and shit.
Yeah, so
fucking right. That's what I'm saying, you know, and that's why I love the dude so much, because it was like, you're down to come out there and get like abused on stage, and you like it? Fuck yeah, come with us, you know. I mean, it's just a good element of like a live stage show, and I can't help but think that a lot of the stuff from this was lifted from the one Wasp tour that they did, where they went full extreme with on stage bondage theatrics. I mean,
I did find his episode kind of sad in a way, because it feels like his masochism, you can see where it's kind of isolated him, and he's kind of just accepting that part of himself. Though I also thought it was great when he starts out, before he does that performance of the song he wrote, where he's singing a Satsugai in his own way, and he's just like hyping up the crowd. They're just all like freaking, they don't know what to expect.
It was amazing. Dude, it hyped up the crowd just as much when they started abusing him again, and he was like, "I'm into it," you know, and he couldn't even help himself. I mean, that dude lives for that shit. It was, I can't explain all the weirdos in the world, and no hate against anybody that's like that, but there are fucking people like that exist.
Oh yeah,
you know?
Yeah, and I agree. Like his episode was very, because he, in a way, it was similar with Negashi, because there was this cute girl that he liked. That, as you said, he was kind of isolated by his, you know. And the strange thing is, she seemed more or less on board with the show until his masochism really came out.
The pig
and then
came out to play.
And that kind of blew it for him. But
which
I did like where
would have became an issue. I mean, if we're being real, if that display really fucked her up that much, and this is clearly like a deep-seated part of this dude's thing,
then they were better off not getting together.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. it is better for something like that to be right out in the open. Not like right away, because then you might not even get a date. But
He could have prepped her a little bit first.
Yes.
She thought she was just coming to see him play in his band, and she was like, "Whoa, this dude's badass. He's doing like Elvis death metal up here." And then all of a sudden,
he intended to.
And then even when he did his own song, which was more of it was more of like an old school, like it was a complete tonal shift for everyone there. It was like, wait, what is this?
Romantic Japanese lounge shit where they're like,
I mean, isn't that what they call like a Anka style or something like that? Or
I forget. The dude who played Zatoichi has several albums out though in that style. Like that was his thing.
I think Anka is the right way of looking at it. But again, the crowd wasn't against it. They were just confused.
Yeah, exactly.
So there are two more characters I want to, actually three technically, but I want to get into. One is Jacob's favorite character, the manager, played by Kobayashi.
Ai Kobayashi, yeah.
Which, if I recall correctly, you really like that voice actress.
Oh yeah, I'm a fan of the actress. Yeah.
How did it feel watching her defile those pipes with these sweet lines, dude?
And she's so cute too. Actually, come to think of it. Okay, so I haven't seen her in a huge number of things, but I've seen her in a few. But she was the main character in the Appleseed movies, for example.
Classic.
I just, again, the character is so
repugnant. I love it.
She is like she doesn't really. She has a particular metric for what makes good music, and it's not a metric most managers would get away with without probably getting sued for harassment.
No, admittedly, you gotta give her this. She is a manager that is ready to take control with a lot of people who might basically get out of control. She is strong in that sense. She's got all of her musicians basically afraid of her.
Well, definitely Negashi's afraid of her.
Well, and Yagi too. Yagi, you can see, has a deep. I mean, Camus,
I don't know.
He's in his own world, so
he's more on her wavelength, I think.
He's not the kind of person that goes out of line, because she's not exactly telling him to do stuff he doesn't want to do. Right. So he's there. And Camus, I mean, Yagi's there for the money, but he also knows not to step out of line. You can tell he's like, I was going to get in line. But
she's very forceful, even with others. Like that episode where they make the movie, which I actually enjoyed when they made the movie.
Yes.
But that director, she kept telling him, like, she's like, this better be good or else.
Well, that's definitely a real world part of their job. Her persona is definitely, again, like a comical,
exaggerated
caricature exaggeration. When you hear that kind of music and you imagine in your head what they might be like as people, and then you think of who's bankrolling all this and like taking them around, you think they've got to be equally as crazy. But again, that's, they're dudes like Brian Slagle, who's a bigger nerd than all of us combined, but that's why he's good at like managing a bajillion death metal bands for Metal Blade, is he can move it all around like that,
she knows
again
what she's doing.
You'd be more likely to find a manager for a band like, I don't know, Devo, that's probably crazier than anything in extreme metal.
She's definitely.
You occasionally get the managers. You occasionally get the managers who you would kind of live up to or down to the reputations of their client. Like probably the best example that comes to mind is Suge Knight. I mean, that dude's straight infamous.
But I mean, also we got to look at someone like Suge Knight and think he was really only successful for a few years, and then he went to prison.
Then he got out and he went back in, then he got out and he got back in.
Yeah, you
Don't
can't
get me
keep
wrong.
that
There's
so long.
definitely some debaucherous managers out there, but it's
Yeah.
not something that really exists in death metal, from what
Yeah.
I've seen.
Right.
I mean, it's,
Definitely
that's
not
more
on
of like
her
an
level,
80s
probably.
rock type thing. Yeah.
Actually-
Again, the simpler the music, the easier it is to get away with doing shit like that.
You know what's funny is that she comes across a lot more as a punk rocker than she does as a metalhead.
She
But-
does, especially in that punk versus metal episode where she's
Yeah.
like, this is fucking awesome, because they kind of do like a crossover performance, you know?
Yeah.
It was one of my favorite moments of the show, because it was like they're really kind of subtly saying that punk and metal are kind of the same thing, you know? It's just, or they're at least like two sides of the same coin sort of deal. And I thought the way they portrayed like the punk rock attitude was pretty solid from what I know of punkers. I'm not going to claim to know anything about that just because I've spent a month or two listening to ska and punk, but it seems like a similar, what do you call it, like ethos or whatever, where it's like, you know, generally fuck authority and let's have fun and be crazy people. And
I do say that it's weird how Sid Vicious is always considered this punk idol, but the real Sid Vicious was far more about optics than any talent, and that's kind of weird. How it's like, yes, he's such a talented guy. He could barely play the bass guitar.
yeah, he
But-
wasn't great or
It was
even
about-
good.
But really, the Sex Pistols was a heck of a lot more about image than anything else. Though, you know, some of them were pretty talented in what they did, especially as they got better. Sid Vicious never lived to become.
Yeah,
But,
it's always been, I mean, as new as I am to really dwelling on the idea of punk, I mean, I had exposure to it through shit like Motorhead, I guess, and then knowing that that's like rooted in punk rock or whatever. And I've listened to the Sex Pistols and whatnot.
I'm glad I got out of it when I did. I mean, I like being more of an outsider than looking at it, because it's just there's so many little fashions. Like, oh, that's fashion punk. You don't want to screw with that, or
Yeah,
that's
see-
pop punk. Don't screw with that. Or
I never really had that because I was more
Yeah.
of a metal kid, so I wasn't around other people that were like, you know, listening to punk. But I liked a fair amount of the pop punk of the late 90s, a lot of skate punk. I mean, it turns out that I super love a lot of punk rock that I didn't even realize was like earlier punk rock. I mean, it's a thing, you know, we're all exploring music, and I think as you get older, it's easier to work outside. You know, we can have eclectic taste like we do now. At 17, your friends might have made fun of you if you were like, yeah, I definitely love Green Day, or at least the first half of their discography, you know?
I mean, the thing about the punk episode is interesting because it hits two things, and one of them I really feel like is a really great way of portraying it. But then the other is, it just makes me laugh because of what it is that, yeah, she's pissed off because they're playing the song and they're basically selling out, and she knows they're selling out by doing this. And that's a huge thing in the scene, or it used to be back in the day. But also, though, she admires somebody who was a part of a band that was an incredibly sellout band. So it's just kind of funny how that works.
They really were. I mean, you look at the Sex Pistols, and they're like fashionably punk, like you said, and then you look at somebody like the Circle Jerks, and those dudes all look fucking disgusting. You know, it's exactly the dudes you would expect would be playing that music, you know.
But as far as like, there's one other character we've missed, which is this kind of innocent in the whole Yuri Aikawa, played by Masami Nagasawa. And she kind of is sort of Negashi's girlfriend, even though they don't really ever make it official because he's such a wimp that he doesn't, you know, really. I think really, if he had said, "Hey, would you like to be my girlfriend?" she probably would have said yes.
Right.
Because and I think
they made it pretty clear
towards it. I mean, she's always angling towards it. Like, she asked him, is it okay if I take this guy to the amusement park? Because part of her is like, you know, are you okay with this? Because she's not, I don't think she's even certain if they're dating or not, which he doesn't give very strong signals. as to whether
No.
they are, even though he clearly likes her. But as you said, his Krauser persona comes out mainly because he's doing stupid stuff like going to a Krauser interview and then going back into the date with her.
Yeah.
And it's just, oh my gosh. Or that time when they're first in the music shop and he's confronting the DMC people because their single came out, which of course he's air guitaring the Krauser way, and they start making fun of him. But then when they see him do the air guitar, they're like, "Oh my god,
It's legit." You guys didn't see like the obvious sitcom nods with certain scenarios there. That I felt like that was,
Yeah.
you know, it came across to me like the scenarios you would get into in a sitcom. You know,
Well,
it's like,
sitcoms are
blah, blah,
sitcoms
blah.
are very episodic by nature, and
Yeah,
there's
exactly.
a lot of similarity here. One of the things that was always, I think, was really problematic for me the first time I saw the show, and kind of was this time, is like, I really want to like Yuri. She's very cute. She's very sweet and good, and she's a great fit for Negishi in a lot of ways. And they both really like each other. They're like stupid in love, as they say. But he keeps doing really dumb stuff. And he's doing really dumb stuff partly because he doesn't have the balls to tell her straight up who he is and what's going on.
Yeah.
And so he's constantly lying to her. And she just keeps coming back in with a smile, like just kind of forgiving him for all this stuff. And it's kind of like, it's a good thing the show's as short as it is, because it would really have bugged me if it dragged out over like 30 or 40 episodes, you know. It just over a few episodes, it's not as big a deal, but it really is like, she obviously likes him, or she would not give him the time of day, probably after that first time in the record shop.
Well, dude,
And,
after
yeah.
that, he just explained that he's like, look, I'm in this metal band.
Right.
You know, I do this to basically start my music career and, you know, further what I want to do with other music. She'd probably have thought DMC was cool after a certain point, or at least like tolerated it. You know?
Or at least understood where he was, you know, coming from or whatever. Like, I get the impression, like I said, that they make it clear that she doesn't like the band, that she thinks they're trash. That she's writing for a magazine. She actually writes a horrible review of the band for her magazine. But it comes down to a lot of this is just my personal, you know, take on relationships generally. But it's like, if you really, you got to have some level of honesty and trust between you, and otherwise it's just
I feel you, dude. It was frustrating, and it was the only part of the show where I was like, why did this become a running thing? Like, I fully expected after the initial thing in the store for him to be like, no, that's totally me in that band, and have her be like the only person that knew it, you know, whereas everybody else, his family included, he was kind of trying to keep separate from it, you know?
Right.
And then there, you know, they could have done the whole arc where she's like, you know what, I kind of am coming around to this type of music, because that tends to be what happens. Dude, I could probably spend a week with you, Jake, and play you several different death metal bands that eventually we'd find something we landed on where you're like, this is pretty cool. There's lots of stuff, dude. Cynic fucking, you know, or like Immolation and people that do like jazz shit with it. There's tons of different, you know, areas of it.
And metal's just like a lot of the others. It's just like, I mean, people on the outside look at it like it's just one type of metal. It's just this. But metal is such a varied form. I mean, there are metals that sound, type of metal music that sound totally unlike stuff on the other end of the spectrum. I mean, I've heard, I'm not nearly as versed, but I've heard like a number of bands, and I mean, One of my favorite, more comical ones is Circus of the Dead Squirrels, but that sounds like totally different than, say, one of my favorites, which is Dream Theater. I love how they go. But so that's the thing.
I'm pretty sure you guys would dig Acid Witch. It sounds like some spooky Halloween sort of old school, like Universal Monster shit, but mixed, I guess, with like Black Sabbath and death metal. You know, there's bands out there,
and we can't forget the most important character of all, which is the crowd.
Yeah.
Oh,
he's got some basic groupies that are the same, like people over and over again, but it's the crowd that drives a lot of the lore and stuff like that. Like the episode where they go to the DMC concert and you see this guy and he brings this little like 4-year-old daughter to the show.
Yeah.
And they're just like, she's raping him. Crowds are so.
Well, first she sings for the crowd. It's like this. It's all I want, your lower body. This little girl singing that, and it's like with her mother just looking on, smiling, and it's like I said, parenting. But
I mean,
yeah, and
you know,
you have the one dude. ANN has him listed as Paragon of Fandom / Victory Red. He's the one guy who has a side gig as a Sentai guy performing for kids. And but he seems to always be present, not only at the shows, but he seems to show up a lot at the moments where the legends grow, and it's
where he rapes Tokyo Tower.
Oh, gee.
And she likes the GK Tokyo Tower.
Oh man, talk about that was an interesting scene. Yeah.
But there's a lot of that, and a lot of the funny elements are dictated by the crowd, just because you hear the crowd's reaction to everything. Like he falls, like Negi. I mean, not Negi. Yeah, Negi from Negi. But Negi, she trips and he ends up accidentally hitting the cop in the back of the head with the guitar, and he falls on top of the female officer, and they're like, "Hey, look, he's doing." Or with Krauser doing his what was it, the how many rapes per second, and he did the extra one for the person who was getting surgery. It turned out it was circumcision.
Yeah.
You know what this show is? It's the anti-back.
Yes.
It is the absolute opposite end of the spectrum from that show, you know.
So maybe opposite end.
Well, we could look at some of this from an episodic standpoint. Since we've hit characters, we'll do a little bit of plot, then we'll move into technicals and so on. One episode, there were a couple of episodes of note. Of course, you had the rap and the punk episode. We've touched on those a little bit. Well, the one that I'll admit, I didn't like all of it, but as Mo said, it's gone quick enough that you're usually back onto something that you like just very quickly. It was the one where they basically invade his apartment. Magic comes into his apartment and
yes.
And I
see that bugged me.
I fucking thought that was the funniest shit I had ever seen while it was going on, dude. Especially when it just devolves into absolute fucking insanity. I thought they were gonna mess up his apartment, but that is the moment where you realize, like, this show is not just going extreme when this band is on stage. Like the show is going extreme all the time, and the fact that he eventually unlocked his like wild youth and was fucking into it, I thought was the funniest thing in the world.
I do admit, I like that they carried that over into future episodes when he's talking to the old man and he's talking about the new DMC album that he's into.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's such. Honestly, how many other animes have you probably seen where there's that like old mentor father-like figure? I mean, it probably exists all over the place. I'm sure I've seen several that have that in there at some point. You know, so it felt like it was like them spinning some pleasant anime trope on its head and just making it fucking debaucherous. And I thought that was
Right.
hilarious. You know.
Yeah, my thing with that one, and this is probably one of the reasons why I dislike the manager so much, is and again, I don't know exactly why it is. I don't really know that I have an explanation.
She's pretty
but
fucking foul mouthed. Some of the stuff that came out of her mouth at different points made me cringe. Where it was
well,
like,
there's that, but I'm talking about this episode specifically. I don't know why, but that is a triggering thing for me. People invading other people's space and violating other people's space, and just she just goes in and they just straight up violate his apartment and everything in it. They have no respect, no nothing. And again, I don't know why, but that just bothers me. And I was furious with her in that episode, and I just so the whole thing with the old man was kind of amusing, and I did like how that played out. But the
just slamming his ass while he's like, "Ooh!"
It was weird how it turned out.
Doing the grossest thrusts in the entire series after they cut back to him, and he's like, it unlocked his wild youth or whatever.
I did find it interesting that that all this like trauma just converted him to be a DMC fan. I did find that
right.
There was a Randy beast inside that old man just waiting to be unlocked. But I mean, again, that whole scene is like, I feel like I have to keep playing devil's advocate or defending metal during this, because it's just not something that, I mean, that I think that was their exaggerated play on the whole trope of like old school rock bands trashing hotel rooms, and that being like the aesthetic that you kind of associated with rock music. So they came to his house to do that. And I love how they immediately stripped down into their undies, and then when the old man came in, they stripped him down to his undies too.
I did find it interesting because if you look at it, you can tell Negashi is fairly wise about what he does with his money. I mean, she's like, "Don't I pay you enough to get a bigger apartment than this?" But you know, he doesn't like to spend it like that. He has a simple lifestyle, but he's got this. I mean, he's got the idea. He knows what he wants out of life, and he knows that he's going to have to save money to get what he wants. So that's part of his idea, is he wants to be able to save the money to quit DMC. You don't see it. He doesn't say it, but you can tell. He's probably got a sizable bank account that he got locked down, that he's been putting money back from. And I'm sure that DMC has a way of pulling him back in, but I'm pretty sure that, you know, once he's gotten his amount to get the heck out of it, that was his plan, is I will get that money and I'm out.
Well, and part of him loves it, you know? I mean, it's in there. I don't know that we ever really get it explicitly like played out for dramatic effect in the series in the same way it would be if these were like long form episodes. But it's in there. You know, this dude is also Krauser, as we've pointed out, and I feel like it's the type of band he would have done for ages. He would have just been that dude that actually had financial stability, where the other guys maybe were the ones coming back for paychecks.
So, as far as like other episodes of note, Camus moment that I thought about that is actually used in the figurines and stuff that comes out is in that Jack Dark episode where he ends up when he's like, "Where's the snakes?" and Camus is drumming with the freaking cobra. So I just thought that was a dream, right?
That's great.
But, probably one of my favorite things that Camus did, that and the continuing to drum even though the whole place was burning down around him.
Yeah, that was legendary right there, and it's again speaks to the drummer's attachment to their kit, you know.
But other favorite episodes that y'all want to talk about before we move?
I don't know, man. I mean, it's really hard for me to choose because I do like so much of the show, but I keep circling back to that punk one. I think musically, when they were performing on stage together, was probably one of my favorite moments in the entire series, if not my favorite moment. And maybe that is somewhat influenced by the fact that, as we've discussed, I'm going on this like ska and punk and whatever journey that I'm on right now. Paying some mind to music that I neglected because I was into metal my whole life, so it was cool to see that because I think even as a metal fan prior to doing this deep dive, I always sort of knew that it was like, I mean, I was aware that a lot of the shit that I liked came from punk. Used to listen to a lot of hardcore as well, like Hatebreed or fucking Madball, shit like that. And I mean, that comes from punk rock. So I was always very in tune to the fact that punk was the other side of the coin. And I thought that they handled that really well in this show.
Oh, yeah, you listen to hardcore punk. It has a lot in common with some of the harder metal.
Oh, yeah.
It's not as technically complex, but it definitely... But I think there's a part of punk that comes across that has that rough edge that makes it. That's where really part of the difference is that it is has a much rougher edge to it.
Well, that's where we're like, if you really think about it, that's where extreme metal music comes from. When you look back at like the Black Sabbath era of metal music, all of those bands pretty much, including Judas Priest, were playing some variation on like blues riffs that they just sort of, pumped into these big sort of heavy things that could rock arenas or whatever. But you get bands like Motorhead that come into the mix that are instead taking stuff from punk that was going on at the time and spinning that into a whole new thing. And then you have bands like Iron Maiden borrowing heavy from like the speed punk, or as fast as it was going at the time, and we owe a lot to punk rock for like extreme metal music. They arguably created fast riffing, even though it sounded like shit when most of those dudes did it. all the metal bands did was tighten it up and make it like more listenable, and then add a different type of vocals on top of it.
Right.
Well,
go
ahead.
I was going to say again, as far as particular episodes, again, I quite enjoyed the movie episode where you have the Takashi Spellman Sawai, this director who's like this huge DMC fan. And he goes and basically goes to the manager and he's like, I want a Krauser-san in my movie. I'm going to make I think he called it a new type of love story. So you got Hanai Yamano, I think, was the female lead of the film. And then the male lead, I think, must have been Makoto Hokazono. And he's basically just this like pretty boy lead, and she's this really cute one who, of course, Negishi is got a little bit of a crush on and whatever. And he's thrilled when he finds out that I could be in a movie with her, and I'm just so happy. And he daydreams about becoming friends with her, and but what will Yuri think and all this stuff. And then he finds out, no, he's going to be Krauser's son. And just the way they use him in the film, the way the actors play it, like he actually ends up having a nice moment with Hanai that actually works very well for the movie overall and whatnot. And the whole time the manager's just like threatening, like, I'm going to block this if I don't like it, if all this stuff. And finally, at the end, she loves it. But the director so messed up the final cut that the actors sued to block the film's release. I just thought that was interesting.
I think that they could have made it work well if they'd made Krauser a demon that was forcing her to have the horn grow on her head and then have that play in the background.
I think that was implied.
I think it was implied, but I don't feel like it was presented any more than he just liked having Krauser in the background. And it was an odd thing. Sort of like when they have that where Negishi is talking about, I'm about this. I'm in this band called Tetrapod Lemon Tea, band, and they end up crashing the band's performance.
Another great moment of
the lead singer.
It was like his kohai was, the lead singer of the band. They actually knew each other, and he had no idea when he came up with that name.
They not only knew each other, but the kid looked up to him from
big time
musical, inspiration from his non-death metal roots. And man, when he's down there fucking just dry humping that kid. That's another one of those moments where it's like, God damn, they're doing this again, because we've already seen the Tokyo Grandpa scene, so it was like, nobody's safe in this bitch. I did not think that's what was going to happen. I'll never look at a tambourine the same way again.
But another thing I did real quick, another thing I enjoyed about the movie thing is like starts off, Negishi loves it. It starts off and it's this tender romance till you see the manager tapping her feet, looking at her watch. You see the DMC fans sitting there going, what is it? What is this? What is? And then at some point someone says, like, it's been like 42 minutes. Where is Krauser's on? And then once he shows up, it turns it on its head, and Negishi is sitting lower and lower in his seat while everyone else is getting more and more excited about it.
I like that you keep bringing up that movie episode too, because it honestly to me highlights definitely something you could consider maybe not a trope but a trend in rock music, is that almost every single time that a band is in a movie and it's like centered around the band, it's only happened a handful of times that I'm aware of, because it always sucks so fucking hard, dude. It's not something that they should be doing because they're a band. They should have a cameo where they put Slipknot for 30 seconds in Rollerball. That's fine. If you had tried to make the Rollerball movie based around Slipknot, it would have been a goddamn train wreck. So it's definitely a thing that happens. I'm hoping that, the Foo Fighters taking the Guar route of making their horror movie themselves will, be proof of my theory, which is that if bands are going to do this shit, they have to make the movie themselves.
Of course, it's hard to say. I mean, like Lordy did a horror movie, and it was a pretty interesting concept because it felt like a Silent Hill type concept, but I swear maybe they weren't as involved as they should have been, or maybe they were too involved, but the pacing was terrible. But it was such a cool concept. And
that's really down to who edits it, though.
But,
if the band, if they have, for example, what's the word? What's the final cut? If they, then they're going to be able to have final say on the edit. But
Dude, the Foo Fighters one has me stoked. Studio 666, you guys are aware of this? It looks like it's going to be pretty goddamn rad, and I've heard people say that it has a better chainsaw death than any of the Texas chainsaw. So that's a tall fucking claim. That's a hefty claim to be making, and I've seen respected people in horror groups saying this.
But this is an eternal, kind of an eternal debate, I guess you could say, is with musicians and singers and whatever taking roles in films, and not just bands themselves, but like sometimes just singers. Some people make, Madonna is a good example of someone who did not make the transition seamlessly. some people do. Like some people
Cher.
are actually. Cher did a fine job with her acting. Yeah, she had a couple good roles. There have been a few people who have done just phenomenal work, transitioning fully into acting or just dabbling back and forth. And then there have been people where, yeah, it was kind of a train wreck. And one interesting one that falls in between is, again, we talk about, you can't talk about this and not talk about Kiss. But like a good example is Gene Simmons has done some film work, and it's usually less than stellar.
Fucking abysmal is what it is.
Like for example, in Extract, he was easily one of the weakest things in that film.
Dude,
Underrated film overall.
This is not even meant to be some Italians. I don't even think Gene Simmons is Italian. Gene Simmons is basically what happens when you pack a bunch of spam into a bunch of spandex and then like somehow put some deranged mind inside of it that thinks it's an entrepreneur, so they just copyright everything. That's Gene Simmons right there. And then you give it an abysmally fucking, some type of, what would that dude call it? A horticultural atrocity. So I guess Gene Simmons' tongue would be some type of a biological atrocity, but the dude is pure human shit. I mean, I hate Gene Simmons. I don't have that strong of an opinion about most celebrities. You guys know this.
No, and I have to say too, no offense to him or whatever, because I'm not a fan, but I'm not going to say I'm out to offend either.
Fuck you, but he's not going to listen to this. Fuck you, but that guy wouldn't listen to us if we had less than like 1 million subscribers or something.
Again, based on his appearance in Extract, I'm going off that because I can visualize it. It's no wonder the dude decided to wear makeup.
Yeah, and he has sleazy and gross.
He has, as the man says, a face for radio.
Yeah. Dope. Well, let's actually, with that note, let's talk visuals, and we'll end this with the music because I feel like the music is a good strong way to end this on. But visuals to me in this are inconsistent, and let me say why, and then you guys can tell me if you agree. Because I've seen many series that have visuals similar to some parts of this, where it's fairly simple, it's minimal movement, all of this, but then it mixes in scenes where the animation is pretty nice and smooth and fairly even colorful at times, especially with the band. And a lot of that I think really is two worlds it's depicting. Like when you're really covering more of Negishi stuff, it's a lot more simplistic. But then when you start covering the DMC stuff, it's like they double down on the animation. And it's just very weirdly inconsistent in the quality of the animation in this. But let me ask y'all what y'all think on it.
Well, I'm going to let Jake go first because you guys are obviously the more like well-versed anime dudes here.
I'm going to mostly agree with that. I feel like it's pretty clear that they did not have the largest budget for this series. And it's pretty clear that they put the budget where they wanted it the most, which is probably the concert scenes. And a few of the off-concert scenes, but mostly, as you said, mostly scenes involving Krauser. The real world stuff, the Negishi stuff is much more simplistic. It's minimally animated. It did remind me a lot of the Adult Swim kind of stuff where they often have minimal animation, minimal character movement. I mean, there are times where I was sitting there thinking like this is the amount of animation you would see on Space Ghost Coast to Coast, something like that. It's not even it was very minimal by anime standards. And the character designs run together a lot in the regular world. But the character designs in the music part of the series were very distinctive and did have a lot more individuality to them, I think. So yeah.
And I don't think I wouldn't say it doesn't work. I just feel like it's interesting that it's inconsistency, because it definitely, I think it definitely works for what it portrays. Because I mean, like him sitting there with his family feeding the cow, it doesn't have to be very high quality animation. But when you're talking about the musicians, when they're having to do all the movements, all of that to the music, that really does, to me, require more of that attention. It just feels very weird. But what about you, Mel? What do you think?
Well, I find it startling. I mean, maybe I don't know. They were clearly doing a manga thing with the vast majority of the animation in it. You guys didn't pick up on that, where it'd be like framed in these little weird black blocks, and sometimes it would be a frame that would expand with the next line of dialogue, like you were turning the page and seeing the other part of the. I mean, it felt it was a live action
type style.
I don't know if you call it live action, but it felt like it was a full motion manga for most of it. And then the parts where they were playing as the band, 1000% would have been drawn better in the comics than the other stuff, because it's to give it that contrast to the live performance, as you guys stated. Obviously, their personas in the band are going to look different. It's not a how do I say this without it being fucked up? It's not even a racial thing. The same thing exists with like bands full of white dudes or any denomination of people. Like if you're a bunch of dudes in a metal band, you probably all look kind of similar. If you ever look at a picture of like Exodus, half the dudes look like they could be brothers, because they're just long-haired fucking white dudes in metal t-shirts. That's kind of the point behind having like a stage persona like this in a lot of ways. Yeah, you can do the uniform thing like Mushroom Head did back in the day or whatever. But even that had its own little like elements of individuality between the different characters in the band. I mean, that's sort of the point, is to anonymize yourself, but then also be able to develop these different stage personas. And if you even look at the image that, Brandon has as our main image here, our backdrop, it's a great example of it. Very different, like a Slipknot, Kiss, Guar kind of vibe,
Yeah, I feel like they definitely had a Kiss inspiration for when they were taking the makeup, but they definitely wanted to pull from multiple places. And I actually generally liked the look of the band. And I admit they'd be a band that would just be cool to listen to. I mean, that would be I'm not sure I'd want to go. Well, I mean, when I was really young, maybe, but not now. But I could see a lot of people really digging going to their shows, and you could tell even with the crowd that if you are like one of them, they all like, yeah, we all vibe together. They generally don't seem all that disrespectful to each other. It's just outsiders that they're like, when they think the outsiders are getting into the band, they can quickly flip the switch to being like, yeah, man. Like with Negashi, when they were having that confrontation, it looked like it was going to be a fight in that CD store. But when they saw him playing air guitar, they just like, heck yeah, man, let's get into it.
The penis cut.
Oh God.
Thinking about getting one, boys. Not gonna lie.
He told his brother, it was like the erotic.
How much would you love me, Jacob, if I showed up, like, the next time we all hang out with that Japanese penis cut, and I had those thick eyebrows like that dude from Naruto, Rock Lee, my boy Rock Lee.
Jeez.
I had those.
The Rock Lee guy.
So
fuck yeah.
What did y'all think of the music? I know Jake said he had you talked about a little bit about how you thought the music was there. I actually really liked the music. It had yes, the lyrics are a little bit off, but that kind of adds to the fun of the
that's the point with the death metal stuff,
Yeah.
I remember George. Best wishes to him and all that for him passing. But I remember he used to always love the song, and maybe George was one that introduced me to DMC. It's the kind of thing that
I could see that.
I remember he used to show up to a gaming session rape on with the song.
Yeah.
But it's
a play on the extreme nature of death metal, man. I mean, there's songs about anything you can fucking imagine in terms of pure visceral debauchery, fucked with a knife, hammer smashed face, entrails ripped from a virgin cunt, addicted to vaginal skin. These are all just songs from one band.
Lovely.
You know what I mean? But the point of it is that it's so absurd and over the top that it's meant to be shocking in the same way that something like street trash is.
Right.
It's not meant to be taken seriously at all. None of these dudes are digging up corpses in your local cemetery. They're just guys that watch the Denver Broncos and or they're normal dads. Yeah. I mean, it's just dudes who like heavy music. It's not that crazy. Mo, I said, go ahead. Sorry.
I just had a question to you in particular. Would you, if DMC was a real band and you had heard of them, would you end up listening to DMC?
Oh, I would fucking love this. It'd be one of those bands I'd want to be a part of because it's got all the glam rock. It's got the weird sort of influences from shit like Kiss and Motley Crue to actual death metal and shit. It would be exactly the band that I would want to be in. Up to and including the ball gagged middle-aged slave dude that's our hype man. I think that's the coolest idea in the world. I don't know if you picked up on it, Brandon, but I felt like that was a little bit of a Gwar nod too, because it was he's their slave, air quotes, and that was the whole moniker of all the hype crew for Gwar was the slaves, the dudes that would come out and
I think that the people who wrote this, I really do feel like the people who wrote this had a lot of experience listening to music and
oh, dude.
Like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Japan is not a country people think of. Heavy metal is not the first thing that either of you guys think of when you think of Japan, eh? You guys think of anime and Godzilla and whatever other J-pop, different things like that. Heavy metal literally could not be bigger anywhere in the world than it's ever been in Japan. I mean, it is a thing. That's why so many heavy metal bands have a Live at Budokan album, because Japan goes fucking nuts for heavy metal. I'm pretty sure Budokan's in Japan.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, because I think that's where the Made in Japan, the Iron Maiden album, Made in Japan, get it.
That was the thing, in K-On!, which is a slightly different musical sound than this.
Slightly different.
But if you listen to their B-side, their ending tracks, they're a hard rock.
It's a bunch of gore grind or something.
Yeah.
I mean, their B tracks are hard rock, and their A tracks are kind of that light.
How many rapes a second do they hit?
No. But
I mean, you actually get
a Budokan is their big thing. We're gonna go there. That was their big thing at the.
It's the premier stage, dude. I don't know that any bands like this have ever played Budokan, but I feel like definitely In Flames have, and they're a proper, ambassador for at least old school melodic death metal.
I think there's some respect to the music there, to any of the music that's presented there. I think it's a parody, but I think it's a respectful parody to it. But
That's like I said. If you don't look at the lyrics, the metal music sounds really good, and if you don't look at the lyrics, the pop music sounds really good. But the pop music, if you look at the lyrics, they're sappy as hell.
Oh God, yeah.
But they're,
but aren't they almost always in real life though too?
Maybe not to quite this extent usually, but sometimes they can be.
I mean, I felt like musically it was all portrayed really well. Honestly, I would give this my vote. Okay, let's be honest. We're all familiar with Metalocalypse, right?
Oh yeah,
Adult Swim.
Ish.
whatever his name is, Brendan whatever from Home Movies did his heavy metal, death metal tribute, and it's great. It's fun. Their personas match up more with the stereotype of it, but the music itself, while catchy and awesome, I do love most Death Clock songs. Thunder Horse being still a favorite. I probably listen to that like once a month. But the band is really not an accurate representation of death metal. It's an accurate representation of mainstream melodic death metal that was going on at the time. But I think DMC in this represents more what actually death metal and shit like that actually is. I mean, not all their songs are super catchy or like toe tappers. Some of it's just heavy and bludgeoning. And that's one thing that I definitely appreciated, like watching this series, was damn, they're not really shirking on the heaviness of the music. They didn't make every song like something you could release on the Adult Swim website as a single and have it perform.
Just don't put the subtitles down there. Except for the rape song, because you can't really not, because he actually says it out there.
You know what I'm saying, though? Like this.
Oh,
yeah.
I mean, I'm sure you've seen Metalocalypse, Brandon. It's definitely a catchier, more mainstream, polished version of what death metal is. I think DMC is a better example of what it actually is.
And I've got the soundtrack to most of the DMC stuff. I think I forwarded it to you, Mo, at one point. It's still in that folder that I've got that I gave to you to check out. But it's interesting. I mean, you got interesting songs like that. You got Satsugai, which is the lead song, which is, I think, is a great song to have, because it really does pull you into the series, especially when you're reading the lyrics, and you can tell when you read the lyrics and you see the opener exactly what you're in for.
Well, and I was going to say that actual opening animation actually is a really solid opener. It really is a good intro, I think.
So why don't we move forward? I mean, shoot, this is a band that has a song called Death Penis, for goodness sake.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not,
solid band name, claiming it now.
So with that being said, I know we said favorite episodes. I guess I didn't say mine. I don't know if I have one, to tell you the truth. I mean, more of his favorite moments. Like, I kind of like the one where he goes home and he's talking to the cow, and I really like the Jack Gill Dark one, where he uses the same basic tools to tame the hell cow that they have. I thought that was hilarious when he's got that going, and they have that kind of verses going, and of course Kama's taking the snakes, but I also like how the snakes like shiitake mushrooms, so they're eating the shiitake. It's just it's. To me, I just thought I enjoy the humor of this. It appeals to a darker side of me, I'll admit. But I like dark humor, and this one definitely
I like that dark side exists, Brandon. It's tantalizing,
But do any of y'all have anything else that y'all would like to throw out? Like I said, I know we got favorite episodes done, but is there anything else that y'all would want to point out or y'all feel like saying before we close out?
I think that this is a series that definitely you have to take with several, not grains of salt, just teaspoons of it,
Right.
You really just got to go into this knowing that it's absolute straight parody to the extreme level, whether you're familiar with death metal or not, or any extreme metal or punk or anything like that. And I think that if you actually look into some of this stuff after the fact, you'll find some really cool stuff. Japan has a really crazy extreme metal scene. There's just so many bands out there that are great. I'd like to personally shout out Metal Lucifer as one that I think is pretty accessible. Even you guys could get into that. It's like basic Iron Maiden style heavy metal, but they just work the words heavy metal into everything. I mean, they have an album called Heavy Metal Chainsaw,
You know what's weird is that I've heard a lot of other bands metal-wise, and they're, like I said, I know some of them. I mean, I've heard some Guar, I've heard Lordy, I've heard Halloween, I've heard I like Iced Earth, Blind Guardian. I like a lot of the fantasy ones. But it's funny is like some of the mainstream ones like Metallica and some of those I've only heard like a very little bit from.
Just keep it that way, man.
They've never really interested. Actually, Metallica with the whole Napster thing turned me off to the band.
Fuck those dudes. You're just going to be disappointed.
They've got a few good songs, but I never really got into them.
I like in their entirety the first 5 albums of Metallica, and then some songs on a couple albums after that. But man, am I so embarrassed by those dudes. Yeah.
Well, it's kind of weird that I've done that. But actually, though, I mean, like I said, I wanted to bring you on specifically, Mo, because, and we were possibly going to do it on your channel or this channel, but I did want you to see the series because I did want your point of view. And I really do thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for including me, dude. It was definitely one that I needed to watch. And
So what do you think about that guitar legend? Do you think that'd be something that would be a cool like metal legend to have a guitar like that passed down from?
Oh, of course, dude. I mean, my personal dream guitar is the drill guitar from Slumber Party Massacre 2.
Oh, hell yeah.
I feel like there was elements of Kaiser's main guitar through the bulk of the series that was inspired from that. If you look at pictures of them next to each other, it seems pretty obvious. Even the one you got on screen right now. I mean, if we were to pull up the poster just for shits and giggles, pull up an image of Slumber Party Massacre 2 right now, boys, and see what I'm talking about. Like, the guitar definitely pays homage to it, I feel like.
You gotta admit though, it's pretty hilarious. They got like the entire like lore behind it, like the blood of all this and demonic sacrifice and stuff. He gets it, and it shows him later playing his little poppy music on the street.
Fucking A.
We're trying to anyway. People were saying it's just too creepy.
It just strikes me as hilarious watching him take this really dark metal guitar and then playing this really corny music on it.
Dude, not gonna lie, I have seen briefly, I forget who it was. It might have even been Children of Bodom. I saw a band during soundcheck play like the first probably 30 or 40 seconds of the Dawson's Creek theme song, like on those instruments, because until you kick in all the feedback and stuff, they're just instruments, or not feedback, distortion, You got to click on a couple pedals for them to sound all mean and shit. Like, at the end of the day, an electric guitar is the same as it's basically been since, Elvis or Buddy Holly or anybody was strumming out shit on them.
Well, with that being said, thank you all for coming on. And be sure to check out Retro Cult Home Cinema. Video. Why is it I cannot get it? I said this every time, and I just like, boom.
One day.
I know I'm going to get it right.
It's my own fault.
It's like Dane's channel. I can never get Dane's channel correct because he changed that name, and which is not Dangeresque.
To be fair, he did that like twice. I did it once after like 5 years, but yeah, it's Dangerous Arts now.
Dangerous Arts, yeah. I'm thinking Dangeresque because that was the comedy film thing that they did in Strong Bad for Homestar Runner. Okay. So with that being said, thank you all, and thank you for listening if you've listened to this. And later tonight, as this is debuting in kind of noonish on a Tuesday, later tonight, Inside Movies Galore is going to be covering the live action film of DMC. So if you want to hear our differing points, I know I'll be there, and I think Jake's going to be there. And I also think Mo might be there. I don't know if y'all are all going to be there, but you get to see our takes on that as opposed to this. There are differences, but the material is the same. So